Welcome to While the Iron's Hot, the blacksmith life simulator where you build up your very own village, recruiting townsfolk while exploring the huge world, upgrading your vehicle to travel over vast oceans, delving into mines to take on massive creatures, all while learning to master the art of blacksmithing. If you enjoy, please subscribe and enjoy the video. Today was the day, and meeting my pirate friends at the dock, my journey began by waking up. I found a chest which was locked, and having been asked to find my friend Gilly's journal, I picked it up, and I'd be wrong if I read it, right? Inside was a code, which I plugged into the chest, clicking it right open. This was a terrible idea. Even Gilly being on my case, I felt so bad that I restarted the entire day, re-grabbing the diary, handing it over. Having not read it, I received a memento of friendship in return, and happy now, I headed up, having a chat with the captain, and continued my journey to the mystical land of Elian. I was rescued by an old man. Apparently, I was the only survivor, luckily landing in Elian to take over the role of blacksmith. My settlement was crumbling from age though, so I built up a new forge, smelted some iron, slammed it into place, sharpened it, and crafted a knife for the man. He was thankful and let me out to explore the world. In the world map, I could travel vast distances quickly, and finding a couple of interesting places, I first visited the mines. Creeping slowly inside, I grabbed some iron from the nearby nodes, when suddenly, a man holding a knife came out to mug me. Luckily, his brain was as smooth as his head, collapsing the bridge, making us both fall a vast distance and prematurely visiting the afterlife. I guess I'm stuck here now, and escaping being my top priority, I stole some things from a chest, repaired an elevator, and found my way out, and exhausted by this point, I fell asleep. Apparently, there was a village nearby to my settlement, so locating it, I headed inside. First meeting Myrtle, the leader, she told me in order to gain everyone's trust, I needed to repair the community board. So returning, I slightly broke the smelting minigame, crafted some nails and a hammer, and returned hastily. She accepted, and presuming it would be fixed by tomorrow, I promised the child a soldier's helmet, carefully inspecting the one on this man's head, and arrived at my forge to recreate it. Excited for my work to be appreciated, I handed it to the child, who ran off wearing it. The board was fixed though, so accepting 2 requests, I, worried about running out of iron, entered the caves carefully. I grabbed some nearby ores, always on my toes in case the knife man wanted to re-mug me. Never mind, I think he actually did expire from life. I had enough iron though, so I headed to my forge, smelted it, and crafting both requested items, I wandered back into town when suddenly someone yelled about a thief, and sprinting to investigate, apparently it was a rat. Being the local vigilante I am, I took this upon myself, and after receiving my payments, I broke a dead tree and got searching the last seen area, stepping down into a suspicious well and finding the rat's lair. He was actually quite chill like that and just needed a hobby, promising to return the stolen goods for a pair of knitting needles. Porgy the rat was now my boy, so I crafted up a pair of knitting needles for him and his new business venture. Hopefully Rat Boy appreciates this. And he certainly did, helpfully returning the stolen wallet, which I could just take it. Then I remembered Gilly and returned the wallet like a good Samaritan. 1 like equals 1 prayer for Gilly. There was a strange hooded figure, apparently from a town far north, in need of an everlasting chandelier, one that never goes out. Well, according to Empedocles, nothing comes to be or perishes, better known as the conservation of energy. As such, this is scientifically impossible. You just gotta craft it, I guess. I needed a chain and candles though, neither of which I had, so wandering down to the mines, I searched for either recipe, until my pickaxe broke, and it being relatively important, I spent some time crafting up a new one. I realized on day 5 that everything on the world map was destructible, so clearing a path through an abandoned store, I didn't go in, instead finding a sleeping ox on the floor, trapped under the weight of its cart. Cooking up a plan, I returned to my forge and crafted up a knife, heading back to mug him, missing pathetically, and instead freeing him of his shackles, then accidentally inviting him to stay with me in a panic. Whew. There was a broken bridge behind, but not interested right now. I entered the abandoned area, finding out it was an old store, holding the chain recipe and some weapons, as well as a book, which solved the puzzle with this forge here and these 2 pillars needing the correct weapons in the middle, rewarding me with an eternal flame, and more importantly, a straw hat. I was feeling awfully poor though, so returning to the lumberjacking village, I accepted a bunch of new requests and headed to my forge, spending the night manufacturing the recipes. It seems the ox has arrived. Handing the lad my hat, I returned to the town and completed my orders, then deciding to try and fix the bridge. I headed over, but a soldier named Soot stopped me from doing so. Myrtle had probably made such an order, so I asked her about it, but she had nothing at all to say. Well, to quote the old saying, if you can't have what you want, just brute force it. I managed to eradicate most of the natural flora all around the island, unfortunately not finding another way to escape. Turned out to be a massive waste of time and energy, but I did have enough to use the eternal flame in upgrading my forge, and excited to use it, I smelted up all the iron I had until I was completely drained. Undying candles were on my priority list, so after making sure the bridge was still inaccessible, I decided to visit the mines in search of a hint. There was no hint there, but my man is for sure enjoying his time in the afterlife. Still confused, I headed back to the town, but instead I discovered something slightly goofy. This shopkeeper here is a numbnut, somehow selling goods for less than he would buy them for. So by simply spamming some rope, then selling them, I would make a tiny profit each time. Realizing I was probably damaging the local economy, I left before the authorities were called and spent my energy clearing the map space. Hoping the old man could help me find the candles, I asked him and he said the word forge right there, you see. So not bothering to read the rest, I visited the destroyed forge and found nothing at all. So asking again, he pointed me towards the thief rat turned tailor, so I climbed into the well, had a chat, and secured the candles. With everything gathered, I crafted a chain, then put them all together, finally getting the undying chandelier. Suspicious hooded man was very thankful, my reward arriving in a couple of days, apparently, and on top of this, Myrtle finally asked me to fix the bridge, and visiting it, there was already a full blacksmithing setup. I arrived first thing the next morning to check what I needed, craft everything up, rebuild, checked, forged, and rebuilt until it was all finished. Taking the opportunity to gather some wood, I headed across and talked to Myrtle, who said she dropped off a gift, so I returned home and checked the mailbox to find a letter asking me to piss off. In that case, I will, quickly crossing the bridge and entering a strange swamp-looking area, falling through the earth and losing some energy. Trying again, I fell again and promptly passed out. I was hauled home by a traveler, but unfazed, I headed to my ox and found Myrtle's real gift, a cart. And talking to the old man, apparently it was time to fix the stable. I forged some items, bought it, and saw it appear. Now it may not seem like much, but this here is revolutionary. I could now walk around and set up camp with a chest, bed, and smelting gear anywhere I went. So I ventured through the swamp, carefully following the signs as to not pass out again, eventually finding my way into a mysterious hut, and climbing the eerily tall ladder, I walked inside. Picking up Mr. Plant, it was a dark interior with shoes in random places and 2 stories. Solving a couple of puzzles, I was generally a bit confused, so trying to leave, I realized something. I was trapped here. I was now getting a slight sinister feeling, and finding a painting on the lower floor of the abandoned mansion, I decided to copy it onto the table, matching the chair and the candles when... something had moved downstairs. Heading down slowly, I found a floating figure. The ghost's name was Toot, and after answering a few of his questions, he asked me to find all the shoes he had lying around. I already had though, and presuming I'd broken the game as I couldn't talk to him, I was let outside and promptly left. So returning the following night, I entered slowly to see the pair of shoes had respawned, but the cabinet where you store them was still full, and Toot still refused to speak with me. Well, every cloud has a silver lining. I'd gotten some red heels for myself, so assuming the game wasn't broken and I just completed the area, I wandered back outside, discovering some land, and met a man named Scythe, who wanted me to make him a scythe. Thank you for the comedical genius, dear developers. He had specified a really strong one, but not really knowing what this meant, I forged up a completely average tool. It was done the next morning, but before heading out, I gifted the red heels to my ox. I think that's pretty funny. Walking down to meet Scythe, he said it was much too weak and I needed to use the swamp wood. Well, there's one tree just down there and I had a huge amount of energy, so I'll be fine. I won't let this setback affect me. Alright, I have one chance left. If I mess this up, okay, I'll just go home. New day, new me. My energy bar full, I made my way down. Confident in my navigation skills, I fell in a hole. Half of my energy is gone. Well, I needed a pickaxe to access that wood there, so after smelting a bunch, I finished it and headed outside. With 30 energy, I wandered down, chopped to the rock, and realized my energy bar was empty from walking 12 meters. I should probably head back, I thought, as I fell in another hole. New day, new me. Rock gone and path memorized, I arrived at the tree. Happily chopping it, I fell in a hole, surviving with the timber and finally crafting up a pickaxe. Yeah, but by this time, I had gotten so genuinely irked by this game design that I'd completely forgotten the tool I was meant to make, attempting to give it to Scythe, obviously failing, and passing out on my way home. Dear Mr. Scythe, after much turbulence, I have finally forged the strong-handled scythe you have dreamed of. Now please, take the stupid thing and never talk to me again. Having not even received anything for my troubles, I headed out in search of my piss-off letter's origin, but finding a traveling dude and a strange set of musical instruments. They could apparently be fixed up using various ingredients, predominantly metal string, which was luckily sold by the wandering trader. Excited to fix them up, I also ran into my ox, hiding in a bush, gathering the courage to meet with a lady ox. I recommended a bouquet. He agreed. This is getting romantical. Now heading out in search of flowers, I ran into a windmill where a chef pig was looking restless. I asked what was up and he explained his lack of spatula. Light work for me, luckily, returning when the morning sun rose and handing one over, purchasing some pancakes from him, and finally heading up to the mining base camp. This time Ox followed me inside and chatting with a soldier, I was granted access by the king, the author of the letter. Impressed by the undying chandelier, he was happy to fund my blacksmithing adventures forever if I visited every town in Ilion and got a memento from them, then shot back up the mountain. While I was here, I accepted an engagement ring request, then talking with the diving miner, gave it a solid try myself, earning a beautiful flower for my bouquet. Except I didn't receive it. That's fine. Trying again, I hopped out and received nothing. My inventory had been full. Hoping my ox's love life could recover from such a loss, I forged up an engagement ring for the guy and handed it over. Gave the dive one more go, my grand prize being several lumps of metalliferous earth. I was told to head east to the hunter's village, but first, the instruments. With everything I needed in mind, I crafted a bunch, repaired them, and was finally able to absolutely bust it down. Now, to be honest, I'm not really used to games giving me absolutely nothing for completing things, so you could say it was probably worth it. The east was a very dark and perilous place, and having been asked to find 3 children, I just mucked about for a bit, gave up and put away my things, returned with a newfound confidence, and managed to find all 3 by pure coincidence, gaining a scroll as a prize. A very important scroll, apparently, one that unlocked the lantern pole upgrade. I needed an eternal flame though, so cooking some up using the swamp logs, I forged up the rest of the ingredients, purchasing some iron and realizing I couldn't make any metal string. Heading down in search of the recipe, I ran into a chicken in need of a compass and a chest behind some trees. Returning to my camp, I crafted both a compass for the chicken and an axe for the trees, handing over the device, receiving 75 gold. Why does a chicken with a pipe and a fedora in a swamp in need of a compass give me currency when I provide him with one? The chest had the string recipe, so I set up the camp, crafted some, and finally upgraded my cart, allowing me much more visibility in the dark. Exploring a little, I arrived at a mine entrance, apparently the only way forward, and entering. Unfortunately, this was cut short when I ran into a bat-looking character and was knocked out. Not wanting to run into such a creature again, I arrived at a different cave, which was unfortunately completely blocked off in need of a key. So I dove again, and the dwarf man did not provide one, so I returned to the scary place, admiring the beautiful background and avoiding the hell spawn. I found a hole in the back wall and a gong in need of a hammer, so I, for sure, intentionally fed myself to the Batman. Set up base camp and made a gong ringer. Expecting some cool musical puzzle, I arrived and rang it, luring the bat upwards and ending my pitiful existence. Slightly more intelligently this time, I blocked off the entrance and rang, trapping the goof, allowing me to navigate the guarded areas, finally finishing it, finding a combination lock and spamming it for the fun of it. I exited and was dropped down all the way to the beginning. And upon climbing all the way up again, I found that finding this combination was the only way through. I had one idea on how to find it, that being the suspicious man in the fields. His name was Sneaky Kyle, accompanied by Sneaky Horse, stuck here thanks to his lack of sneaky horseshoes. He was very much a combination knowing looking man, and happy to accept his request and forge some up for him, I handed them over and received a safe passage into the sneaky headquarters in return. Not exactly what I was looking for, but wanting to check it out, I grabbed the ring from Sneaky Sam and entered the lair. I was quickly caught, but allowed access, descending even further until I was stopped by some lava, pushing a block on it and picking a flower at the very end. The bouquet needed 3. I had collected 3, but I had 2. The dwarf still had no backups for me, so I had the thought that maybe it was sitting in my mailbox back at home. On the way, falling into a pit and spending the night using Scythe's expertise to build some land supports. And I had made it my quest to fully patch up the entire swamp, make it a safe place for any travelers. This was unfortunately a very expensive procedure, calling for vast amounts of nails and hammers, which I would often run out of, resulting in me folding completely and crafting 150 of them. And on top of this, the only way to find the swamp holes is to fall into them. And in the morning of day 23, the entire swamp was covered, free and safe passage for everyone ever. And the cherry on top, when I arrived home, the final flower was waiting in my mailbox. Dear developers, I'm in love. Quickly making the bouquet, I visited the lady ox again and was told by my ox to hand over the flowers. Just remember, the worst she can say is no. She was allergic and ran away. That was unfortunate. It was time for me to visit the warrior village, so entering the mines looking for the combination when I spotted some graffiti on the walls, followed them up, memorizing the shapes, plugged them in, and a goddamn... Wait a minute. There was a very obvious combination on the walls here, and putting these in, I was finally able to open the gate, allowing me access to the cool desert area on the other side, where I was trapped by brambles. Needing an axe, I entered my camp and crafted one up. And, path cleared, I entered the village ready to take on my challenge. Speaking with Peregrine, I was told to get my memento, I needed to craft an ancient metal living bird. Compared to the spatulas they wanted in the previous village, this was quite the step up, but asking a guy, he promised to help with my task in return for some arrows. I set up camp and forged some, interrupted on my way back with a request for a fishing rod, handed the arrows over and getting a billet. My current presumption was that everyone would supply a different part of the bird, so I crafted up the rod as well, in return being told a mechanical heart sat buried up north. That was good to know, but I was also asked for some knives, so I returned and crafted them, receiving the main bird recipe, and was finally asked for some better arrows, which I needed feathers to craft. I didn't have any though, so off exploring I went, arriving in a different biome area with a chicken, unfortunately immune to anything I tried to pull. So, admitting defeat, I just bought some, crafted up the arrows and handed them over, receiving a decent amount of money and also a new request for a ballista ammunition by the same man. I don't care anymore, so I left and made my way up, digging up the mechanical heart, then returning to my camp to craft the bird. But the recipe strangely didn't work with neither iron nor steel. I would need to create a brand new mysterious metal stronger than either of them, or make bro his ballista ammunition. I made bro his ballista ammunition. This was well worth it, receiving a cool new hat, which I gifted to my ox. Very, swag. Enough of these shenanigans though, it was time to find a new metal, so I wandered down, discovering a farm area of sorts and a stressed looking farmer. He asked me to herd all of his chickens back into their cage. Sure, he had something awesome for me. I got to work, eventually getting them all in, and claiming a treasure map as a reward. It was pretty difficult, involving moving 4 blocks downwards. The treasure turned out to be a clue of sorts, so ignoring it for now, I remembered about my slight storage crisis and made the trip home, checking the camp upgrade and realizing it needed pancakes. I just came from the pancake cellar. Making the trip up the next morning, I visited the pig and bought some pancakes. 1 to be exact, returning home and realizing I needed 1 more. I don't care anymore. Crafting a chain, I got the house upgrade instead, which allowed infinite storage at the cost of it staying at home. This was fine though, and crisis averted, I made the trip once more over to the hunter village, and hoping the request board would supply me with the new metal, I forged up a new hammer. My efforts were in vain, and I received nothing special upon handing it over. Alright, as I mentioned before, brute force is the only way at this point, so I got to work randomly chopping away at the surrounding area. Finding another goofy clue thing, then in a burst of brain power, I remembered the first recipe I had read here, the Damascus billet, the recipe for a bar of Damascus, the mysterious metal I needed. This was brilliant news, and I was happy to spend the evening crafting up a large amount of billets, smelting them, and finally crafting the lifeless metal bird husk, throwing it in the furnace and watching it open its eyes. At long last, I was able to hand over the bird, getting my first village token in return, and was told to head to the alchemist's village down south. Quickly crafting up a cast iron pan for a raccoon before I left, I discovered there was no village down south, but simply a beach. So obviously, I crafted a boat. I'm just playing, I don't know how to craft a boat. After forging up some beautiful tools using Damascus, hoping someone in the blacksmithing village could help with this boat, I made a quick visit, but to no luck. And with my options waning, I even returned home to ask the old man. He was not of any help. I found something on day 30. A gatherer's hut, pretty cheap, and although a little off topic, I wanted to get myself one. Limestone was one thing I needed, so making the trip all the way again, I chopped some rocks, returned home when I had enough, and ordered the building. And this was such an improvement, coming with repaired homes in the backgrounds and visiting people, including the diving dwarf. It seemed my town was suddenly becoming a real town. Very happy with my progress, I once again made the hike over to the desert, and setting up camp on the beach, I crafted myself a pickaxe. I needed this pickaxe because just outside was buried the floating hull scroll, so bringing it back, I crafted the other items needed for the boat upgrade and attached it. This allowed me to travel over shallow water, giving me easy access to most areas of the map, as long as it had a beach to land on. Heading southwest, I found another boat traveler who I couldn't talk to, and an island beyond him. Then floating northwards, I came across an icy area above the mining village, but with no beaches in sight, I returned to my expected path, entering an arid desert area housing the alchemist village. I cleared most of the land surrounding before heading inside and speaking with the leader, who told me to get the memento I would need to repair their ancient, naturally connected potion brewing area. Slightly overwhelmed, I spoke with a child who asked me for a scroll of ancient knowledge. what am I doing here? I arrived at the location of the ancient potion brewery with 4 open slots for machinery and a note saying to explore the southern shore. As such, I headed straight down and found a chest containing the recipe for all 4 needed items, as well as some glass and metal bars. There was nothing else around, so setting up camp, I checked the materials that they asked for. All of them apparently needing glass, 4 in total, being more than the 2 that I owned. So forging the other gear I needed, hoping someone in town sold glass bottles, I wandered inside and was luckily handed a glass lens and bucket recipe. And returning to the forge, I made some, but not enough, requiring more of the local resources. Glass also required iron, so after forging some, I exited and gathered some of the local flora, which I made into a bunch of glass, multiplying it in the smelter, and in combination with some of the Damascus and metal bars, I crafted up the ancient beaker, ancient burner, separatory funnel, and finally the decanther. Hauling them over to the ground, I placed them, picked them up, and placed them in the correct order, completing the task. Looking to claim my token, I entered town, but was asked to brew a potion using it. This was not in the initial contract, but agreeing anyways, I realized I couldn't talk to the person to supply the potion ingredients, so deciding that the culprit was all of my yet to be completed quests, like there are just so many of them. I returned to my camp and got to work clearing my to-do list, beginning with a spatula, then a glass lens, running out of glass, so buying some local resources in town, then forging some up, finishing with some glass bottles. Handing these out in the village, I got some strange potions in return, then packing up and hitting the seas, arrived at the original island, and giving Myrtle her long overdue spatula. I made the trip home in the morning of day 35, but got distracted by this strange tower. Entering, I picked up a flower, then began my ascent, finding a clue on the floor, slowly making my way up, crossing precarious bridges to arrive at the top, finding another lost note and a key chest. Using the found clues, I opened it, getting a broken scroll and the materials to fix it. The forge being the place to do it, I returned and repaired it, but it said it needed the altar to unlock. Suspecting my time was being somewhat wasted, I climbed up the tower again to discover the altar wasn't even working. Maybe it needed 1 day to reset or something, so coming back the following morning, it still didn't work. Oh well, in that case, I won't work either. Instead, picking up the potion making pre-mix faithfully made for me, it just needed to be poured in, so I climbed up and watched as it filled the machine. Something seems up. I was now stuck in a large hole, a maze to my immediate left, my ox nowhere to be seen, and only a half-destroyed tent and gear to my name. My situation was not looking good. Who could have meddled with the potion premix? I had no time for these questions though. I had plenty of time actually, as it seemed the maze only opened at night. Well, you can only fiddle while Rome burns. So with nothing better to do, I cleared the general area, trying one of the local fruits and getting unbelievably high. It even refilled my energy bar temporarily, but out of hallucinogens to try, I slept until night. I could now officially enter the maze, finding a day-only door and a chest with some solid gear and a goofy note. Heading upwards, and with my energy quickly diminishing, I found another ruined camp area where I took refuge. Now that it was day again, I had access to the new areas within the maze. First, a chest with some gear and another note. Back to the first day door, which had a teleporter, bringing me to some more gear and another note. Then finding another teleporter, I was brought to the shoreline. Not the end, obviously, and just curious, I ate another fruit, dangerously deciding to run down with my energy quickly draining. Here finding the alchemist village token, leading me to hypothesize maybe it was the village head who mixed with the premix, embarrassed to admit she lost it or something. I also passed out. As such, I had limited energy the next morning, but luckily after looting another chest, I wasn't draining too quickly, so I was happy to head out exploring. I found another teleporter, arriving at another camp, but with still a little energy left, I waited until the night doors opened and rushed downwards, just making it to another one, hopefully the last. The end of the maze was just outside, so after having a quick peek around, I headed home, but upon my arrival, I was happy to see my ox, but the old man and Porgy the rat had gone missing. And chatting with Myrtle, I was told that Opal's trials for the tokens were a facade for him to gain ultimate power or something while I was gone. A little worried now, I decided the old man would fill me in, so I floated off in the pointed out direction, and seeing the blocked boat was gone now, I had a chat with a man who wanted some barbells. This seems very important. So, returning to my forge, I first did some item organization and realizing my lack of materials, smelted for the night. I made a whole bunch of Damascus the next morning, which I turned into barbells, which, handing them over, he said he wanted to move into my town if I had a spare house. I told him there wasn't, and left. Further down, there's a whole heap of smaller islands with chests, and after some exploration, I entered the local village. And much to my surprise, the rest of my pirate crew from the beginning were all living here. Very pleased, I asked about Gilly, but he was the only one to not survive. A little bummed, I'd spoke with the village chief, who told me that the old man had left recently and I should totally build her a submarine. In my possession, I had an old pirate captain's letter saying the diving bell scroll was to the southeast, so presuming it'd help me make a submarine, I made my way downward, but was distracted by Miss Kong on her little skull island, asking politely for 5 red bananas. So new mission prioritized, I floated out, exploring in search of some. During this time, I found the old pirate captain's island containing the diving bell scroll, but more importantly, I now had 5 bananas, which I handed over. I was pleased, but not any closer to finding the old man, so finding a knowledgeable looking lad, I asked, but he demanded I become someone he trusts. I'm not though, so finding Miss Kong's gift in my pocket, I began work on the diving bell upgrade for my cart. And by the morning of day 44, I had everything, but I was too poor, so I grabbed some useless things and headed into town to sell them off. Now significantly more wealthy, I was able to purchase the upgrade, which allowed me to harvest the gold and such hidden in shipwrecks scattered around. I had an inkling the old pirate captain had the submarine recipe, and the letter said his ship was up north, so locating it quickly, I secured the blueprint. Finally, I could... Unfortunately, it required a metal cage which I didn't know how to craft. Heading out as a coping mechanism, I spent the day harvesting all the shipwrecks around and thinking of how to get the sneaky man to trust me. And an idea appeared after finding some suspicious lost treasure, that being crafting myself a sneaky ring. Sneaky bro completely fell for it, telling me the old man was in the sneaky headquarters 2.0, and heading in the pointed out direction, I eventually arrived at an island with a dwarf, to whom I told the password and was let inside. There, I met the sneaky boss, a chameleon, who said the old man headed to meet Opal and that he wanted to move into my town if I got a mead hall. Interesting offer. I'll be sure to get back to you. Luckily, the person on the pier was the owner of the lost treasure I found, so stopping to blow the cartoonishly large horn multiple times, I retrieved it and handed it over, deciding I would build the submarine before heading out after the old man. Unfortunately, there was still no way of getting a metal frame, so I begrudgingly packed and headed off. Arriving at the blacksmithing village, I caught the old man heading up the grand elevator, presumably to meet Opal. I wanted to procrastinate though, so promising the dog I'd get his bowl back and a lady 5 buckets, I locked in and asked the guard if I could head up. I was denied access though, being told I needed both village mementos I had and a cart suitable for the icy climate up the mountains. Porky the rat was also here, who wanted a sewing machine. Locking straight back in again, I crafted everything I needed, then attached some chains to my cart wheels for extra friction, and was finally allowed access up the giant elevator and arrived in a snowy plains. In front of me stood a classic ice puzzle where you move indefinitely until running into something, aiming to land in a specific area. Luckily, light work for me. Heading right on through, I met the Hunter village head, who admitted to being the saboteur of the potion machine, but claimed it was for my own good, delving into the old man's past. Apparently, Opal once found a legendary ore and asked the old man's friend to forge a weapon using it. This ore belonged to a greater power though, and Opal's greed and the old man's friend drive resulted in the destruction of my village. Story told, she cut the bridge, denying me access. Luckily, the annoying arrow boy was here, volunteering to build his ballista here to launch me, or something. So taking careful note of the required resources, I forged up everything that was needed and returned, now being asked for a volcanic spear. I don't have the recipe for the base spear though, so somehow guessing it, I managed to forge the great volcanic spear. I had my priorities straight though, returning to the village to hand over Milo his ball, and subsequently getting completely stuck on the ice maze. After much struggle, I managed to escape and arriving at the bridge, firing the ballista and carefully making my way across, first try with no mishaps, and happily spending some time exploring. But enough of that, I forged myself a tidal pickaxe and headed into town where the old man and Opal were. On my way up to the elevators, I met the hooded guy from the very beginning and finally reached the top. Here I learned that Opal was looking for the legendary ore again, and along with it, the creature that had destroyed everything all those years ago. And here I had the choice: descend into the mountains and risk everyone's life, or trust the old man and stay out of it. I obviously descended into the mines, following the path of the long-gone famous blacksmith. Here, I had to complete various puzzles in order to drop these wooden crates downwards to press these buttons. Then finally following the clues painted on the walls to put in a combination, and slowly, I headed into the final room. And here stood mountains of the legendary ore. So much power right here, and there was the creature that ended the lives of so many. I luckily managed to escape into a tiny room where a note sat saying the author was trapped here, trying to wait out the dragon, rationing their supply supplies. Next to the note sat their corpse. Not trying to repeat history, I bravely exited, chatted to the dragon about the ore, and was granted my life and one piece of Adams. When I ascended, everyone was here to celebrate. We discussed the future, shipped Opal off to some third world country, and the credits rolled. I don't care though, we still have much more to do. First, I needed the old man to pull his weight, so forging him up a new arm, he went off to practice with it, giving me time to venture back into the ice village to retrieve my pickaxe which I had left in the dragon's cave. On my way up, I was given 2 requests from the townsfolk, entered and secured my belongings, and deciding on a whim to head down and say hello to the dragon, where I was surprised to see I was given free reign over heaps of legendary ore under the watchful eye of the dragon. My storage was looking full, so after throwing a bunch of stuff in the infinite closet, I decided my main goal was to upgrade my stable. If you remember, it needed pancakes, which I traveled far up north to purchase some, cleared a little land before, for some reason, taking the long route home, being distracted by shipwrecks and a lighthouse. Inside was a broken air pressure system, a cool elevator, and a completely shut down light dome. The man obviously needed help, but not having any valve wheels, I saw no point in me being here, returning home to upgrade my stable and organizing my items to fit the new chest that came with the upgrade. I needed 2 recipes on day 52, the metal frame for the lad in Tidal Village, and valve wheels for the lad in the lighthouse. Finding these would take some adventuring, so completing another stable upgrade, I made the journey up to the mining base camp and met the engaged guy who needed a metal frame for his a metal frame. He forgot one thing though, giving me the damn recipe. Hoping for a miracle, I dove again for the dwarf, and unexpectedly, yeah, I got absolutely nothing. So quickly running out of options, I floated and searched around the nearby villages, through the swamp up to the mountains, and retried the ice puzzle when I saw some extra ice islands to the west. Interested, I floated all the way around to discover it was absolutely nothing. I managed to complete the ice maze the following morning, checking all of the surrounding chests, but finding no such recipes. I hadn't expected any though, and deciding in the meantime, I would begin work on emptying my ever-lengthening to-do list. Handing over the forged minecart, I headed to the desert to pick up some new orders and spent the night crafting up some buckets for the mining base camp and various other things. But something miraculous happened on day 54. I was headed to the islands to buy a propeller for a sewing machine when I noticed the merchant sold a metal frame. So setting up camp, I crafted everything I needed and finally put together my long-awaited submarine. It had been hard, but I had pushed through, rightfully expecting a massive reward. I handed it to the captain. Did you forget to give me something? I was rewarded with the village token. Useless, by the way. Opal had been exiled. No point in complaining though. Having the buckets made, I arrived at the mining town and handed them over, deciding to return and work on my town for the time being. Predominantly, I wanted this mage tower, but it currently stood locked, so needing to find someone to occupy it, I traveled east towards the alchemist village. Arriving, I visited the guy who wanted the scroll of ancient knowledge, who was just standing there, and remembering he wanted the scroll of ancient knowledge, I cleared some area, set up camp, and crafted some gears for a quest, returning to the desert and entering the old wizard tower. If my hypothesis was correct, the altar only worked at nighttime, and as expected, I could actually put in the locked cryptex, receiving a scroll with lore. But that's just a theory. What's not a theory though, is I ain't reading all that. Handing it to the lad who was happy to move into my town. Great, I now only needed to make the actual building. I realized quite the amount of buildings I needed to make, and knowing it would be a lengthy procedure, I decided to begin with a forge upgrade, completing it relatively quickly and heading off to the east in search of local resources. With a solid supply, I was able to forge up a bunch of valuable glass and continue my search for the other materials needed for the mage tower. Only one more thing left. I set out across the swamp, through the dark woods and up through the farm, unfortunately not finding what I needed in any of the shops, and eventually resorting to, cleaning up the local landmarks, arriving home and finally building up the mage's home, coupling as a potion store, my first shop in the town. Not planning to keep it this way though, I set my sights on the tavern, forging myself up everything I needed for such a project, gathering the funds and officially building up the home of the Sneakies, coming with a local quest board. My town was now truly coming together with a fence and developed buildings in the background. I also noticed the sneaky boss sold pancakes. Not exactly the career change I saw coming, but something did catch my eye. In the town ledger, I could see that the next mage tower upgrade unlocked item enchanting. This sounded certainly prosperous. The upgrade required quite the preparation though, so getting to work, I forged up a bunch of new equipment, paying the last of my savings to upgrade the building. It didn't look that much more spectacular, but meeting with the apprentice, I asked for a weapon enchantment and... Yep. slightly stronger now. The lighthouse was also another building that was currently unavailable, and needing someone to move in, I headed to the only place I had an inkling on where to find someone, the lighthouse. Heading inside, I still needed valve wheels, but on my defeated walkout, I noticed something. Hooked on the wall was a wheel. Further up was another wheel, and slotting them both in, the gas stopped, securing the bulb and placing it on top. It wasn't spinning like the normal lighthouse would though, so heading back down, I filled up a canister with oil, inserting it, and amazingly, it began working. Upon being asked, the keeper said his daughter actually wanted to move into my town and rewarded me with a bunch of recipes and resources. For my town's growth, both the adventurer's quarters and the lighthouse were on my radar, but both costing money, and me being eligible for public housing, I needed to complete some requests. The board here had pretty lackluster rewards though, so I decided to make the long trip up north to the ice village, arriving and checking the board, quickly completing the request and handing it over. This process being surprisingly easy, I accepted another request, crafted it and handed it over, accepted, crafted, handed over, until I had easily enough funds for both of the buildings. Traveling south the next morning, I eventually arrived back home where I forged up all of the other needed items for the adventurer's house and built it up. Here I could gear people up I had met and send them off on different adventures to receive different rewards. Handing some solid weapons to the barbell dude from the island, he headed out for the day, and remembering the dog Milo also wanted to join my town, I made the hike upwards to his resident village, asking but receiving no reply. I did though craft up a metal frame and hand it to the marriage guy, officially completing the wholesome marriage quest line. I had one last scroll to obtain until my cart was maxed out, and I had an inkling on where I could find it. I remembered while in the maze, I had seen a mysterious figure, so entering, I realized I couldn't go anywhere until nighttime, waited until the sun set, then headed further inside carefully, except I ran into a problem. The mysterious figure was only viewable when high on the cactus, and while I was in my cart, the cactus had no effect on me, and the only time it did, I couldn't reach the figure in time. On top of this, I couldn't camp here, so I couldn't even get out of my cart, so giving up for tonight, I slept in a pre-made camp. Determined the next morning, but knowing I had plenty of time until night, I arrived at the desert village and handed over some gears for a quest, seeing the sun was beginning to set and rushing back to the maze. This time, leaving my cart outside and stocking up on food, I was ready to confront the hallucination. Night quickly fell, I consumed some cactus, and spotting the figure, I ran over and met with him. It was a snake named Sherman. Sherman was a little weird, but also pretty chill like that, giving me the final scroll, and not wanting to waste food, I barely managed to drag myself into the nearest camp. Nice, scroll secured, so I just needed to upgrade my cart. This sentiment was quickly forgotten though, when I arrived home and realized the rest of my town had completely disappeared. The buildings, the walls, everything in the background was just gone. At least I got a scientist outfit for my cow, so that's something. I also had a secondary main goal, to get my friend from the alchemist village his wife back after she had left him when he went surfing alone. Being the romantic genius I am, I handed him a brand new board and recommended he give it to her and surf together. Man, I should try that in real life. Quickly arriving home, I finally decide to fully pimp out my cart, and with it fully maxed out, my next goal was to max out my entire town. Step 1, the house. I crafted everything I needed and paid, fully constructing the upgrade, then turning my eyes to the gathering hut. I headed to the forge and spent the night there, getting everything that I needed. As such, I could happily upgrade it the next morning, watching the new building appear and deciding to check out the adventurer's house. I wanted to send Soul out campaigning, returning to the house to grab a weapon when I saw an elevator installed inside. Curious, I headed up to a time-telling clock and a piggy bank where I stored 200 gold. Distraction over, I sent my guy off, meeting the dwarf and sending him off as well, before reading the town upgrades and seeing that the Mage Tower 3 could reveal a hidden schematic. Very exciting, I thought, but I was very much too poor, so I made the journey up to the Ice Mountain village and accepted a bunch of requests, crafting them in my base, ending the night smelting up Damascus. I headed into town, handing everything over and making a solid 3,000 gold, but not being satisfied by this, I accepted a bunch more, spent the morning crafting them all up, which I was actually getting quite efficient at, handing them out and making a further 3,000 gold. Satisfied now, I made the trip home, where I checked the Mage Tower upgrade cost. Uh-oh, it needed swamp logs, but heading over, the swamp was completely barren of trees. But what about these bushes though? Not knowing, because they needed a sharp item to harvest, I returned to my town and forged up an iron scythe. Sure that would give me logs, I arrived, but the scythe wasn't sharp enough. Oh well. Picking up a spare dagger from storage, I slopped into the swamp, but it was also not sharp enough. Well, I got a sword and a spear, but they two were not sharp enough. Complete and utterly lost now, I gave up all hope and set out in search of a merchant who could just sell it to me, approaching the alchemist village that didn't have any in stock, moving to the hunter village, which also didn't hold any in the catalog. Really grasping at straws here, I thought that maybe the wood was sold at the lumberjack village, where unbelievably 50 swamp logs sat in stock. 650 gold poorer, I returned to my forge and crafted the other items needed for the upgrade. Everything set up, I upgraded the building, running to see the curtains unveiled, admiring the new design and scrolling through the new stock before finding the mage who was happy to go home and study the unknown schematic. Intrigued on what it could be, I set my sights on a final house upgrade which added a third floor but needing a chandelier, consequentially needing candles. Last time I got candles from the rat, but it seemed that he was out of town currently. Slightly remembering that he had ventured north for a business opportunity, I wandered up to the mining base camp where I found Porgy, who was no longer in the candle business. Well, while I was here, I might as well check the ice village, where, believe it or not, the merchant was selling candles. Surprised with my luck, I returned home. The mage had completed his research, coming back as a fire arrow thing, using the legendary ore. I'll take it. And asking for another recipe, I got to work forging everything needed for the final house upgrade, but after realizing I was just too poor, I exited to complete some requests. On top of this, there was an achievement to complete one in every village, so I made the trip to the alchemist village and finished one board request, moving on to the hunter village where I finished one there as night fell. The tidal village was the only one left, so making a quick visit, I crafted then handed over a fishing rod to the navigator guy, getting the achievement. I was still far too poor though, so having enough of this achievement business, I slid to where the real money was made, accepting a bunch of requests and quickly crafting them all, handing them to make a quick buck. I then began my real plan, using my professional bartering skills to easily quadruple these funds. This is an intended game mechanic, by the way. So funds plentiful, I was able to upgrade my house, adding a third and final floor with a forging vault. Not quite sure what this meant. I crafted up an ancient beaker, which I was pretty sure I was asking for, slightly progressing this bar on donation and realizing I could donate literally every forgeable item in the game. This seemed like some hardcore endgame stuff. Not exactly my goal right now, but wanting the reward nonetheless, I spent some time crafting up a full set of iron tools and a set of steel tools, donating them all and landing one off the first reward. So returning and crafting a small sword, I donated it and received my 5 metal bars. I remembered something the next morning. I had unlocked it, but still built no lighthouse. As such, I crafted up some lenses and built it up, noticing that my town had suddenly reappeared, and I had a new resident, Matilda, the lighthouse keeper's daughter. But something else caught my eye. The next lighthouse upgrade could clear every cloud on the map. This sounded very advantageous, so I got to work forging everything I needed, finishing as night fell and purchasing the upgrade. As such, it is exploration time. First visiting the islands to find any area I had missed, coming across none at all, floating up to the ice area where nothing new was discovered, heading back down to the eastern coast and finding nothing at all, boating around the maze, finding absolutely squat, and arriving back home. That was a waste of time. But the next upgrade would highlight tiles with secrets, and this sounding very advantageous, I began forging everything I required. A propeller was needed though, and knowing a merchant who sold them, I got one on discount, finally purchasing the upgrade and checking out the awesome looking building. But that didn't matter. It was secret getting time, and heading out for the second time today, I wandered to the archipelago, finding no secrets whatsoever, floating up to the ice area and discovered a huge nothing at all. Exploring the farm, detecting faint signs of absolutely nothing. Arriving at the maze to unearth not a single thing. Yesterday having been a great failure, I decided today I would craft something great. To be exact, the Mrs. Kong figurehead, as I knew someone who would like it. Unfortunately, an essence of the sea was required, which I did not have. The trader should have it, I thought, but he didn't. The village shopkeeper should have it, I thought, but he didn't. Then I remembered that mountain essence was made by smelting a mountain thing, so by simply smelting a water thing, there you go, essence of the sea. Mission complete, I crafted the rest of the figurehead and was happy to float back to the village and hand it over to the man who began my adventure, the pirate captain. He was very happy, asking for an anchor as well. Wondering why the captain wanted a figurehead and an anchor, I obediently crafted one up for him and handed it over, receiving a pirate hat in return. Very nice. The ox is now a plunderer. Returning to my village, I decide to upgrade my forge as the old man had still not begun to help me. Quickly forging all the items I needed, I bought the upgrade, saw the building appear, and finally the old man could get to work. So, accepting a random quest from the tavern, I told him to get to work, and he crafted it in no time at all. The next building along was the stable, unlocking a messenger bird, sounding very cool, but requiring another metal bird. Then I remembered I had a spare one. You see, you actually have to smelt it to give it life, and when you smelt it, you have a chance to double the item, and with luck, I had doubled it. So, with the majority of work already done, I crafted up the rest of the upgrade items and returned to purchasing it. The bird sounded very exciting, so deciding to deliver yesterday's request as an excuse to test it, I wandered out. There was only one problem. Where is this guy? He had sent the request remotely, and not knowing what this sign meant, I left the hunter village, traveled west and checked the mining village, floated down to check the tidal village with no signs of the goof. Turns out, after looking through the village nearby as well, he was in the only place I didn't check, the alchemist village. A little annoyed, I checked the bird, and it worked. I don't know what I was expecting, to be honest. Heading home bright and early the next morning, I saw the dwarf fully levitating over the open ocean. Okay. My town, though, was only the gatherer's hut and the adventurer's house off being fully complete, so deciding the tavern was my main goal. I used the last of my glass on bottles and bought the upgrade, giving me slightly better requests, but the next upgrade added a postal system into the game. Wow. This sounded very advantageous, but I was currently too poor, so making the trip to the ice village, I accepted a bunch of requests, realized my lack of Damascus, bought some, and smelted for the night. I forged all 4 tools, then spent the morning hand delivering them. Now, having a decent chunk of cash, I bartered with the shopkeeper, and using my carefully chosen upgrades and charismatic flair, I was able to 10x my gold. Realizing I may have bankrupted a local business, I arrived back home and forged the rest of the tavern material before buying the building, heading over and meeting the postal service man, a little guy named Sneaky Postal Service. Wanting to take advantage, I accepted a quest, gathered some materials, and handed them to the old man to craft. Order complete, I returned and mailed it off. Finally, an almost fully automatic money-making method that actually probably abides to the law. The mage had discovered the mining drill recipe the next morning, so that's something. The gatherer's hut and the adventurer's house were the only 2 places left to upgrade, so beginning there, I realized I needed a submarine. This was a painful thing to craft, starting with my lack of glass. Surely someone sells this stuff, right? That was my thought as I made the journey to the ice village. Found it wasn't sold there, and instead moving to the tidal village where it was, buying it along with some other things and forging the submarine, and also a bouquet back at home, fully prepared for the upgrade. As such, I upgraded. Very cool. Anyways, the next adventurer looked awfully like Milo the dog, and wanting my lad hanging around, I realized the upgrade will allow it, picking up some gear I already had lying around, and forging up the rest, finalizing the building upgrade in no time, welcoming Milo the dog into my town. Subscribe if you love Milo the dog. He was damn reliable as well, so sending the K9 out adventuring, I got to work crafting the items needed for the 3rd adventure house upgrade, finishing it as well, welcoming the lost loot lady from the sneaky headquarters. Everything was going great now. Only one upgrade left. Only one problem. It was locked, simply asking me to cheer up the Yeti. Now, Yetis are traditionally from the colder areas, so wandering all the way up, I arrived in the snow, explored, and found a particular looking heap. Lo and behold, there he was. The Yeti. He was a very grumpy character, demanding a gift from me, but not having the most experience with pleasing large, furry, animal-like beasts. I landed on food. The sneaky boss sold a bunch of it, so inventory filled with deliciousness, I returned the same day to be completely rejected. He didn't want a single one. Well, it did look cold here, so riding all the way back home, I decided on some everlasting flames, some candles, and my secret weapon, a bouquet of flowers. My plan utterly foolproof, I returned to the ill-tempered Sasquatch and was surprised that he accepted both of the everlasting logs, only asking for one more. A simple task, setting up camp and smelting one up. I handed over the final log, was thanked, and told he would explore the world in a new light and return when the adventurer's house was upgraded. He'd better get a move on though, as I had just arrived home and after checking the needed resources and getting the old man to work, I begun crafting all of the gear required. Once I was done, I sent the old man's request off and prematurely ended the Yeti's half-a-day vacation. The building looked great and my new adventurer was very competent. Only a bit of gear was needed until he could effectively complete the highest level of quest. Excited, I returned to my closet and grabbed a bunch of weapons, running back to realize he couldn't hold any other than meat. I mean, that's fine. I had a solid shield in storage, but he also couldn't hold it. A little on my nerves now, I gave him the meat and wished him best of luck. To complete my town, all that was left was the gatherer's hut, which unfortunately required a lot of pickaxes. I am somewhat of a prodigy though, and was able to craft all 5 from memory. Thank you, thank you. With everything in hand, I entered the town ledger and bought my town's final upgrade. It was fully complete. A far cry from the ruins I had arrived at. My greatest achievement was finally finished. I only had one thing on my mind. How is the rat Porgy going? He had asked me for a sewing machine, so after heading to the archipelago to pick up a propeller, I crafted one up, made the long journey up to the mining base camp, and handed it over, earning myself a new sweater and another achievement. I must say, the sweater looked very nice. My to-do list did not though, and picking a random quest to complete, I got to work building the requested bombshells, riding down to the alchemist village where I handed them over. In return, I got some goggles. I must say, they looked quite idiosyncratic. My next task asked for a prosthetic limb for a man named Crush, which I quickly made, headed out and handed it. No mind, that's Hawk. Having ironically picked up another quest from Hawk, I arrived at the mining base camp and handed over the. No mind, that was Harriet who gave me another quest. Sure that Crush resided in the ice village, I made the journey over, checked all 3 stories to find no such man. Did I check the alchemist village? Are you? No, not another quest. I already checked the hunter village. Why am I here? Hello, is Crush a resident of this area? No, not another quest. At long last, arriving at the tidal village, I found Crush and handed over the hand. Getting a recipe in return, I left journal somehow bigger than it had been this morning. Getting to work to counter this, I crafted a lantern necklace, a glass jar, 2 pickaxes, and began on a tanning machine, chipping away at my mountain of work. The machine in question required a propeller. Seeing as the local merchants sold them, I bought one, returned to my camp to craft the tanner. Not a skin tan, by the way, tanning leather. I also forged 2 pieces of armor and made my way over to the alchemist village to begin delivering everything. Getting a potion in return, I made my way to the hunter village, obtaining a new outfit as a reward, slapping it on Ox, who... I'm going back to the sweater. The mining base camp was barren of customers, so I returned to the nearby village where I completed 2 quests, finally heading north, completing the ice maze with no problem, and entering the ice village where I made one last delivery. My journal was now only 3 quests of full completion, so after crafting a shovel in my camp, taking the elevator and giving it, I reduced that number to 2. As you can see, the second last quest asked for me to talk to people for the recipe, then make a table. So after spending some time chatting with my own townsfolk, I realized I already had the table recipe thanks to my mage's endless efforts, and after having a missing glass scare, finding some extra in my chest and crafting up the council meeting area, I wandered out to deliver it. Now, if my memory serves me right, the request came from the mining base camp. There doesn't seem to be anyone here, so maybe it was the mountain ice village. Yeah, no one here either. Beginning to have deja vu, I ran down to the tidal village where no one stood to accept it. The alchemist village had no one. The hunter village, no one's here. The lumberjack village, no one. Wait a minute. That means no one wants the table. I checked every person in every village, yet the request remained. One last ditch effort, I ran to the base camp, talked to the folks there, opening the quest and allowing me to hand it over. In return, I got another quest and a hat. So with 2 left, I gave the hat to Ox, who looked quite sumptuous, and got to work creating one of the requests. There was a lack of glass though, so forging the materials for one, I discovered a lack of iron, so I smelted a bunch, but in need of further items, I boated over to the nearby hunter village and found absolutely nothing. Luckily, the alchemist village had some in stock, so I left as the morning sun rose, setting up camp where I crafted and smelted over 100 glass bars, finding some recipes and finally getting back to work on completing the last tasks. I made a portable alembic for an alchemist, then a pair of binoculars for someone who wanted a pair of binoculars. I handed over the potion maker, getting a turban in return, then wandering up north to give Bradford his binoculars. Finally, my journal was empty, not a single thing to do. I was blissful as I made the journey back home. The turban, by the way, looked pretty swag, but I didn't have time for that. You see, it was my time now. This consisted of spending my resources on supplying myself with the highest level of gear, and upon realizing I'd kind of wasted my time, I pursued the game's achievements, deciding on this to complete. 50 requests was a lot though, so entering the lumberjack's village, I accepted 5 easy ones, set up camp, and carefully forged 4 of them, handing them over and accepting a further 5, working deep into the night, crafting, finishing up as the sunrise began in the distance. So 6 completed requests in my pocket, I walked in, a swagger in my step as I gave them over, one by one more that was all, and no achievement. Wanting a change in scenery, I headed up to the mining base camp, ran through the whole thing, and realizing there was no quest board here, I wandered to the hunter's village. Found a quest board where I accepted everything, set up camp, and after checking my town's status through the bird lad, I locked in, forging everything that I needed, heading back inside optimistically, handing over everything and gaining no achievement. And the leader wanted me to make them a refrigerator. Not my priority at the moment. Accepting 5 more requests, I returned, chose a random one, minecarts, and got to work. Little did I know, this damn request would suck every piece of Damascus I owned. You see, I needed 3 carts, so 6 wheels, which required 4 curved plates each, which are 2 Damascus bars per. Fully defeated, I left in search of some to buy, successfully avoiding the monster guarding the mine shortcut, completing the ice maze, and arriving at the ice village where I purchased the whole stock. The mage had sent me the recipe for a gun. Thinking of potential targets, I rebought the merchant's stock of Damascus before getting to work smelting. As you can see, if I time this minigame well, I can double my billet to bar ratio for that smelt, managing to turn 70 into 135 bars. Very happy with myself, I begrudgingly crafted up 3 minecarts, along with all of my other requests, making the trip back to the hunter village, handing them out, and finally getting my achievement. Food taster was next on my radar, so I took a quick visit to the pig to buy some pastry, sailing through the archipelago and arriving at the tidal village, where I bought all of the fish dishes on sale, was asked for a fuel-powered boat engine by the chief, bought the last provisions from the sneaky boss, and hoping I hadn't forgotten anything, I consumed everything in my inventory, getting the achievement. My plan for day 90 was to craft a refrigerator and a fuel-powered boat engine using only my primitive tools and basic ores. Following the given instructions, I forged up the basic pieces, but seeing as a propeller and a cage were both required, knowing a merchant sold both, I headed over, proving myself an idiot and returning with only a propeller, unfortunately forced to make it myself, eventually completing both large crafts. Excited for my potential reward, I first visited the tidal village where I was handed 5,000 gold. Well, my local business advantage taking scheme already took care of funds as a whole, so I was a little disappointed. But then arriving at the hunter village and being rewarded with 4,000 gold. Well, at least the experience helped with experience. You see, another of the achievements asked for a higher level of prestige gotten through crafting and other activities, and this was my next goal. Recently, I had received the recipe for an Adam's greatsword, which motivated me to upgrade all of my tools to the legendary status. I couldn't quite afford it though, so deciding to harvest some, I headed up the elevator, accepting a quest from the hooded man, which asked for a mining drill, descended into the dragon's lair, and picked all that was available. Excited to unleash my true potential, I arrived back home, placed them in, and recipe not available. It seemed I had gotten ahead of myself. Only the volcanic greatsword could be upgraded using Adams. But not wanting to have wasted my time, I grabbed a sword from my closet and tried to upgrade it, realizing it was a volcanic sword, not a volcanic greatsword, crafting one and finally coming to the conclusion that I had wasted my time anyway. I wasn't even able to give it to my adventurers, so I sent them out empty-handed, and returning to my XP quest, I got to work smelting all of the iron in my storage. It was almost midday of day 92 when I finished the batch, grabbing my 947 bars and crafting them all into strips, the best way of getting XP. The only problem, I had to click 1,140 times. By the time I was done and crafted them all, the sun was setting, and I think I got carpal tunnel syndrome. The sun is burning my skin. But knowing this would not be enough, I returned to my ore stash to remember it was empty, and headed out begrudgingly to collect some more. While I was in the mines, I even decided to visit Sneaky Sam, the man from day 3. The late Sneaky Sam. After completing a voyage to the other mines as well, I returned to the hometown and smelted it all up, heading to bed a little past midnight and gaining 3,400 XP from crafting, leveling up twice. But the grind had just begun, and having been shown the effectiveness of crafting strips for XP, I asked the dwarf to gather ores, then headed out myself, visiting both mines to clear them out, buying bars from passing merchants and the storekeeper in the mining base camp. Not even bothered to travel at this point, I entered my camp and took a potion, bringing me to the tidal village where I bought some more ores, teleporting to the alchemist village where I did the same thing, following suit in the hunter village. Inventory completely filled now, I returned to the forge and began my arduous task of smelting 1,000 of my raw ores. This process is particularly annoying as you have to click 1,000 times only when the bar is in the green. As such, watching a show or doing any other task is impossible. This becomes real boring after the first 5 minutes. Unfortunately, I had to do it for 20 minutes straight, completing the long task of smelting as the sun set. This is a day later, by the way. There is no time for complaining though. I had 2,000 clicks to perform in order to turn everything into strips. It was all worth it though, as I managed to upgrade 3 times that night, but still no achievement appeared. A not so surprising side effect of my work was thousands and thousands of metal strips, quite expensive stuff, added up, accumulating in my inventory. So I wandered out the next morning looking for someone to sell it to. The merchant wanted none of it, but luckily the store owner in the mining base camp was happy to pay me for them. Quickly reaching the money cap, so returning hastily, I deposited everything into my piggy bank, running back to sell the last of it, which I used said funds to purchase more bars and ores. The achievement was close, I could smell it, and with newfound determination, I returned to the smelting hell. And even the crafting got completed as the morning sun rose. At this point, I was very much done with smelting and crafting strips, so as a change, I set my sights on the mining drill for the hooded man. I got to work, but ironically, I needed some iron for the gears. I have no iron. It all got turned into 2,000 short iron strips. This problem was fixed by a quick visit to the alchemist and hunter village, returning quickly and forging the drill. Before I headed off, I did a little smelting, then began my journey north, arriving at the ice village and handing it over, getting an achievement as a reward and also 5,000 gold. And what's more, on my way out, I noticed the man who requested the lantern was wearing the one that I gave him. That night, I leveled up twice again, finally getting the achievement and reaching the famed prestige level. Utterly done with crafting and such, I made my way outside and decided to spend some time cleaning up the world map, getting rid of commonly run into obstacles and generally making everything look a little nicer. Eventually my pickaxe broke, so crafting a new one, sold all of my strips to the local merchant, and for no particular reason, I wandered over to the lighthouse, climbed to the top, realized there was nothing to do up here, and left. Thank you for that productive segment. With only a few days left, my eyes were now set on the complete 100 requests achievement. I only had around 50 done currently, and accepting 5 from the quest board in the lumberjack village, the reality of my situation began to dawn. As soon as they were all complete, I handed them out and accepted 5 more, completing them, not sleeping a blink that entire night, hand delivering as the morning sun rose. Except for the last one, the delivery was fast asleep. So I accepted 5 more in the meantime, waiting for my guy to wake up, giving up and returning to my camp, and trying to get crafting, I once again ran out of iron. Luckily the local storekeeper sold the stuff, so returning and smelting, I locked in again and made all 11 of my current orders, because I'd realized the guy hadn't been sleeping, I had just made the wrong thing. Eventually I was able to hand everything out, sensing the end was not nearing, I accepted 5 more, crafted them all, handed them out, accepted 5 more, and got to work. Now keep in mind, I have not slept in multiple days. Today was no exception. The morning sun rose once again as I handed everything out, accepting 5 more requests, returned to smelt up more iron, and crafting all of the requested items. I'd like to point out, by the way, at this point, I'd fully memorized every recipe of every item possible to be asked from this quest board. I'm losing my mind. Finally handing them all out, I accepted 5 more, crafted them all, and reaching my limit, I dragged myself into town and began delivering. Finally, I'd gotten the achievement. I feel absolutely nothing. This emotion was exemplified when I headed back to my house and withdrew all 200,000 from my piggy bank, losing 100,000 gold in an instant thanks to the money cap. I spent that evening haggling at the alchemist village to make my money back. Having a little bit now, I made my way over to the ice village where the real money is made and haggled all the way until I had secured a solid 250,000 gold in the bank. Returning, entering the village, I refilled my wallet completely and ended these 100 days by walking fully satisfied through my busy town. Thank you all for watching until the end. Please comment a game that you want me to play and subscribe if you want to, and I'll give While the Iron's Hot a solid 7.5 out of 10.